Hello, good evening, and welcome. I'm Simon Bestwick.
And I'm Gemma Files, and this, of course, is No
No.
Darkness But Ours.
This is the second part of our deep dive into Near Dark, Kathryn Bigelow's 80s vampire classic, and the first of three collaborations with screenwriter Eric Red. You'll find a link to part one in the description below.
It's always interesting when you're having a conversation about movies that seem to mimic each other and they come out around the same time, but when are they being made?
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people, and this was something that pissed me off when I was a critic, don't seem to understand how long it actually takes to make a movie.
Yeah.
And particularly back in the day. And I always think that, somebody might put something in a screenplay like up to 10 years before a movie gets made, let alone somebody approves the screenplay and makes a movie out of it. And that process might take up to 3 years.
Yeah.
And then it might get held back and then dropped, in the...
I did just check, actually, both films were, in fact, released in 1987. What the genesis and gestation.
No, yeah, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me because I remember going to see both of them that year. I dressed up as a vampire and went to see The Lost Boys with a friend of mine. And I went to see Near Dark on my own, and it was one of those things where it played in Toronto for literally a week, and I went to see it as many times as I could during that time period. And the first day I went to see it twice.
Yeah, I
came out and went, holy fuck, and went back.
The Lost Boys is fun. It's the bubblegum version. It's the MTV pop version. It's got great. I love The Lost Boys. I will.
Yeah, and I like it much more these days than I even did then, which is odd because I used to have a huge Lost Boys classic poster on my wall. But even then, I knew that it was bubblegum and that it was it was pretty lightweight. There are moments in The Lost Boys where things go over where you expect them to go, and those are moments that I love very much. But yeah, and it does drop the knowledge, quote, that if you kill the progenitor vampire, the person who turned everybody else into a vampire, then you have more likelihood of being able to extricate yourself from vampirism.
The half vampires return to normal.
Yeah, the half vampires
haven't actually killed anyone. Yeah,
the ones who haven't actually killed anyone, as opposed to the ones who have been killing a person a night for 4 years.
It's the only thing, really. It's one of the very few things that Near Dark kind of fudges, which is this whole sort of. I mean, although just watching it tonight and with that knowledge in mind, because at the end it freeze frames on May cradled in Caleb's arms and closes in, but the expression on her face is still, The
expression on her face is very worried and frightened and sad, and it's like, but I'm not that person anymore. I'm not, I'm not the person who went into the bathroom with Homer, into a classroom with Homer, to help him with his with his homework anymore. I'm not that person, and much as she loves Caleb, and I think she does love Caleb, there's this wonderful thing on the making of supplement on the Blu-ray that I have, where Adrian Pasdar sort of is thinking about how incredibly beautiful Jenny Wright was and how amazing it was to be in this movie with her, and he sort of looks sadly into the camera and goes like, I don't know where you are, Jenny, but I hope you're okay, because I think about you a lot.
I sort of commented sort of early on at home, and I just realised kind of appropriately she's got a bit of an overbite.
Yeah. Jenny Wright is just like a force of fucking nature in that film. I mean, she's, it's like the first time that you see young Angelina Jolie and you're just like, what? Is that a person? Is that a person who exists?
Yeah.
But even more so because she's not Angelina Jolie. She is just the most perfect nighttime cowgirl that you've ever seen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, and the rest of that family, I mean, Lance Henriksen and his absolute menacing Bill Paxton I could if they meet. I mean, it'd be sacrilege to remake it, I know, but if they remade that movie now, I can totally. They'd have to cast Walton Goggins as Severin. He would just be the only actor who could just carry it off. But yeah, I mean, interestingly, because
and Jenna Goldstein, and they had all three just come off of Aliens.
Of course, yeah.
So they were really used to playing off of each other, and that that family vibe that they have was something that Kathryn Bigelow decided to use.
Thinking about sort of the idea that Caleb's love is what enables May to come back.
Yeah,
that is actually what destroys that family. It's the moment that May. I mean, it's like it goes in on one hand. Okay, Caleb is in this sort of like this very mostly sort of mostly kind of normative kind of family unit. There's no mother. We presume his father's a widower.
Yes. Yeah.
But he's a sort of working on a farm. Very
he's a vet basically. But he's like a cowboy vet.
Yes. but May has an attraction to him that goes beyond thinking of him as a food source, and so she bites him without bleeding him because she wants him, and that sparks off all this other, because it sparks off.
I mean, ostensibly it's to get away from him because the sun is coming up, because this has some of the weirdest how fast the sun comes up, how fast the sun goes down action that I've seen in any movie aside from Evil Dead 2. But I mean, the whole thing, and again, when I rewatched it before we thought that we were going to do this, I said, Steve was like, well, this and this and this and this. And I said, I get it. But, this is a tone poem about vampirism. And better yet, it's a tone poem about road movies and cowboy movies and Westerns, which is an outlawry, which is ostensibly about vampirism, but nobody ever says that. Nobody ever says the word vampirism. What are you anyways? Not too sure. It's like, seriously? Never heard of vampires? It's like The Walking Dead, where nobody's ever heard of zombies, Yeah. I mean, it's that kind of world. And, when I say it's like a tone poem, there are a lot of aspects about it that are almost like a music video. There's a lot of sort of clipping and squishing that's going on, and it will pull you along with, the lure and the pressure and the, just, oh yeah, absolutely, I'm in. It's like either you're in or you're out. And the minute that the current hits you, you just keep going. There's no slack in that film, in my personal opinion. There's not a moment where you can say, well, I could have cut that. There are a lot of moments where you're like, maybe there could have been more of that.
What's supposed to have happened to Lloyd, to Tim Thomerson's character? Because he just vanishes in that third act.
Lloyd just kind of vanishes from everything. I don't know whether Tim Thomerson had to like move on to something else, but in the climax, certainly it's all about Caleb getting his sister back.
Yeah, and the logic of that is totally it needs to come down to him versus the others. I mean, I love how when his sister's been kidnapped and they've let down the tires in his truck. So what does he do? He saddles his horse. With a cowboy hat on. I think you even see a tumbleweed blowing up the highway.
You do. You absolutely do. Yeah, tumbleweed blows across the highway. You can see the moonlight glinting off of the spur that Severin gave him.
Yeah, that is a lovely touch.
And it's like this is a Western, but it happens to be a Western about an outlaw family who are not, the Benders, the bloody Benders. They are vampires.
without ever saying the word, and you have there's none of the paraphernalia of stakes through the heart or crucifixes. The one thing that seems to be able to kill them is it was sunlight or possibly a big fucking explosion with a lot of fire involved.
Yes. I think that fire is definitely the biggest thing. It's like they'll play with it, but they sure don't want to get caught in it.
Yeah.
Sunlight and fire. And also, I think in a weird way, an argument could be made that, again, one of the things that my husband said to me was, I am amazed that they lived this long. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm amazed that they lived this long, because I think that there's something about entropy, that's inherent to this particular type of vampirism, this particular type of non-sparkly vampirism. Lance Henriksen's character, Jesse Hooker, and his woman Diamondback, Jesse, who at one point says, Caleb says, "How old are you anyways, Jesse?" And he's like, "Well, I'll put it to you this way. I fought for the South. We lost."
Yeah.
And, so he's like, what, 150 years old at that point?
Young for a vampire, really, in the big scheme of things, in the terms of
but it's an American vampire, for one thing.
Yeah.
And
I did sort of say to Kate when we were watching it, because we of course, in between the last time we watched that, whenever that was, and this, we binge watched all the seasons of Justified, and of course, one of the things you notice about Justified is the bad guys are complete cretins.
Yes,
are complete morons who just kind of like they're like walking Darwin Awards.
Yeah, I mean, Walton Goggins is the smartest.
Yeah,
and even he, keeps kind of stopping every once in a while and going, "Oh shit, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm still doing this. What?"
Yeah. It's kind of. I think I actually said it. Obviously, these are basically like the vampire versions of the bad guys of Justified. They're not particularly bright. They're just vicious. It is remarkable.
They absolutely are like that. But what I was going to point out is that Jesse and Diamondback have a conversation at one point where they're driving around looking for victims, which they get by essentially parking somewhere and letting somebody attack them, or picking up hitchhikers and letting them attack them, and she says, he says, "Hey, isn't this that same road that I was driving along, that you were driving along when we first met?" And and she's like, "Oh yeah, I remember. I saw you by the side of the road, and I thought, that's trouble." And you were, But then they go on and they start talking about how they can't remember when that was.
Yeah.
Either of them can remember that. It's like you expect Jesse, who has 150 years of nights for everything to blend into everything else, but Diamondback is definitely younger than he is. I think maybe she dates from like the turn of the century or something like that, the turn of the 20th century, and she too. It's like a dream. It's like a long dream, and it sustains itself for as long as you can deal with it. It sustains itself for as long as you are okay with it. And then entropy sort of takes over. And in a way, it's like they allow themselves to die.
Yeah, because they do go. It's always this kamikaze thing where they're just going after. They're going after Caleb, no matter what. Even though the sun's going to be coming up, they could just wait until it's dark and go after him again. But
exactly.
Go after him again, and but
none of them have any strategy. None of them have any,
Well, I mean, Homer can't see past getting hold of Sarah, and of course, this is where it all unravels. Because there's as soon as May kind of wants something more, as soon as she does what all children do when they start to grow up, which is look outside the family and for a partner of their own. that destabilizes, it creates that jealousy with Homer, because he's clearly always had a thing for May, even though he can't do anything with his thing for May. And then
no, exactly. It's like Homer was turned into a vampire to give Diamondback something to cuddle and to, I don't know, get her over having left her own children behind, maybe, or something.
Yes, yeah, I could feel that one as a
or possibly as a kind of piece of camouflage. It's like, here's the mom and here's the dad and here's the kid.
Yeah.
And and Severin is like a younger brother for Jesse. And I think that he and Homer kind of think of each other as brothers as well. Even though Homer, I think, is probably older than Severin, but he's always ragging on him the way that he would on a little brother, even when he's calling him old man.
Yes. Yeah.
Get yourself together, old man.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so Homer makes May, and it's amazing that he does it in the first place. I don't understand how that worked, because, we know from Interview with the Vampire that Claudia cannot make other vampires because she's so small. She doesn't have enough juice. She couldn't even drink a person dry, really.
It obviously works different.
Exactly. But one way or the other, he makes May. But May is, and May is adopted as a daughter, as a sister, but she's not interested in Homer. Homer is a little boy to her. And she probably hates him on some level,
Yeah.
She's being polite about it, but she probably hates him on some level.
Yeah.
So the minute that he sees Sarah, Caleb's sister,
that's his revenge.
He's and he's just like, oh, that could be somebody for me. Somebody my size, somebody my ostensibly age.
We're discussing, it's kind of like that old joke, like Edward in Twilight. He's got eternal life. What does he do? He hangs around high schools.
Exactly.
But again, if you are even if you are like hundreds of years old in the body of a 12-year-old, the only women you own well, there aren't any women your own age, but the only women who are the only mature adult women who'd be interested in you would be paedophiles themselves.
Yes,
so all you could really do is turn up another child your own age, someone else's your own physical age, and wait for her to kind of, after the first couple of decades, the age difference probably doesn't matter as much. But Homer's got that jealousy because Caleb's taken May from him. And so he's, he actually says that makes, now I'm going to turn your little sister, and that makes us even Steven. So he still thinks like a child there. But, May leaves because May's pulled towards Caleb, she grabs Sarah and she leaves, she literally bails out, she jumps out. And when she runs, Homer runs, not after her, after Sarah. And at that point, of course, the whole family's gone because May's renounced them. Homer's burning up on the spot and he's just going to explode. And so, like you say, I think they do kind of choose to die because it's like, well, what's the fucking point?
Yeah, exactly. And Severin's already dead by then. It's like if it had been Severin, Diamondback, and Jesse being able to go away together, then that would have been fine. They would have remade a family. And I don't even actually think that they would have come back and done anything to May and Caleb. It's entirely possible that they would have just been like, fuck it. It's like Jesse would have been like, yeah, leave him alone. Screw it. We got to get out of here.
Like you say, it's like a dream because, it's there's that line in the shipping news that Julianne Moore says about something completely different, the death of her husband. She says, it's forever and it's yesterday. And it's kind of the same thing. It's because I was reminded of something that Joni Mitchell said about monogamy, about having a long, having this one, long committed relationship with another person. She said, if you want to do the same thing over and over again, have a one night stand, just have a string of short term affairs, one night stands or whatever, because the those people, they'll just hear the same few stories for you, they'll see the same few aspects for you, whereas in a long-term monogamous relationship, that other person will get to hear all your stories, will get to know everything about you. And the vampire's existence, it's a cycle, and it's repetitive, it's mundane, it's almost boring. It's like we go out, we drive we find a new place, we get rid of the vehicle, find a new vehicle, find victims, drink their blood, fuck off to the next place, and so on and so on. I mean,
the happiest that you see them is when they're hanging around in that motel after they've escaped the cops.
Yeah.
And Jesse and Severin start playing cards, and Diamondback is like in the corner cleaning her knives or something like that. Yeah. And Severin immediately starts cheating, and they pull their guns on each other. It's like the happiest that you see them. And yeah, Caleb and May go out to take the air.
Yeah.
And, hug on each other some, and Homer goes out to take the air in the other direction. And,
yeah,
but those three, that triangle, that could have gone on possibly forever. But the minute that everything else unravels, that Severin's gone, it's Diamondback and Jesse just basically going, yeah, you know what?
They're just trying to run Caleb and the others down, just thinking, we've had it. Just let's take them with us, kind of thing, if we can.
I remember Anne Rice talking about how dumb she thought Near Dark was, and it's like, how stupid would you have to be? And I'm like, I don't think you understand how stupid most vampires are, even your vampires, and B, it's like, oh, my vampires are so much better because they can get really lost in like looking at the play of light on something.
I just I mean, I did the best. I always kind of think of that line of Tom Cruise's at the end of the Neil Jordan film. Oh God, still whining, Lewis. Have you heard enough? Yes, I've been listening to that for centuries.
Yes, and the in the most recent revisioning of Interview with the Vampire, there's some amazing moments where Louis is basically ragging on Lestat and being like, oh yeah, that's right, I shouldn't read the whole book, I should just read the first 10 pages and pretend I've read the rest of it, like you. So yeah, I mean, they're constantly in motion. They never stay any place. They are always running towards or running away from. They're always in pursuit of that next, I guess, orgasmic bite of that moment.
Very sort of the classic, the classic sort of serial killer.
That murder-gasm,
of vampires and werewolves being sort of an attempt to kind of rationalize the rationalize the sort of the methodology of the serial killer. But I mean, thinking of Derek Raymond's Factory novels, and how he looks into the minds of killers there, and it's like that really there is the sort of the banality of evil there, the repetitiveness of it. I think there's a bit where in The Devil's Home at Leave, in Home on Leave, where the detective says to the killer, the trouble with you lot, the trouble with people with your kind is you never tell me anything new.
Yeah, it's true. And I was thinking of The Devil's Home on Leave as well, because that guy has at least some style.
Magruder, yeah.
And he isn't as fucking insane as the dude in I Was Dora Suarez.
Who is just batshit crazy.
Absolutely batshit crazy.
But it's like, and he's saying, but he's in this kind of, and who's has that self-destructive element. He's like, by the time the detective catches him, he's basically completely destroyed his own genitals in some.
Yes, exactly. Magruder would never do that. But and he has a bit of a style. He has a bit of style. So he seems like, I don't know. I could see Tom Hiddleston playing that character. But then at a certain point, you'd be like, oh, but you're literally not as smart as you think you are, and you're addicted to murder. Murder is your drug. That is your drug. You couldn't stop murdering if you tried, and you would never try. It would never occur to you.
There's a lack of there's a certain sharpness of observation in terms of observing the patterns of human behavior as a predator observes his prey. But in terms of insight, there's a wonderful bit in The Devil's Home on Leave where the detective characterizes evil as your own existence fascinates you. You think nothing of taking a life, but your own existence utterly fascinates you.
Yes.
In this kind of like really utterly narcissistic way, this guy's like talking about his hands and the various lines and what they mean. He finds himself so complex and fascinating.
Yeah, so endlessly fascinating when there's nothing there. There's nothing in there. And it's like I I have no idea what Jesse was like when he was alive. And he's kind of interesting because he's as old as he is. Yeah. But I don't know what he could tell you about anything, really. He's probably forgotten half of what he knew. It's like, I know I woke up after a battle. I know that. Obviously, maybe I was wounded because I have this big scar on my face. Think maybe something blew up in my face. I mean, it also reminds me of oh God, who's the guy from Preacher? Cassidy. Cassidy during the Irish Rebellion. Some horrible old whore of a thing, jumped out of a canal and just grabbed him. Yes. It's like, do you know who she was? It's, oh no. It's like, oh, I never saw her again. She was awful. I'm thinking that's something that happened to Jesse. It's like some horrible horror thing was, sucking on him.
And you can hear the third part of our deep dive into Kathryn Bigelow's Near Dark here at the same time next week. No Darkness But Ours is made possible through generous donations from horror enthusiasts just like you. If you'd like to support us, you can sign up to our Patreon and get access to exclusive content, or you can make a one-off donation via Ko-Fi. Links in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know in the comments, share and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Let us know as well if there's anything you'd really like to hear us talking about in the future, and we'll be back with more at the same time next week.
Until then, I have been Simon Bestwick.
And I remain Gemma Files, and this has, of course, been No Darkness But Ours.